Welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. This is Alan Adler, your host. We are excited this week. We're back to autonomy in a couple of ways, but we have a company today that we really have not focused on at all. They've been around for a while now, and they are absolutely making an impact in the sense of either, from a supplier standpoint or from a partnering standpoint with many automotive companies and all of the trucking industry, really. And I'm speaking about Applied Intuition. And so we have two guests today I want to introduce everyone to. First is Qasar Younis, who is the CEO of Applied Intuition, and also Peter Ludwig, the Chief Technology Officer. We welcome both of you. Guys, let me give a quick brief on who you are, and then we'll get into some questions and, learn a little bit more about what you're doing in this space. Because again, you're new to me, really. You probably shouldn't be. And I suspect that you may well be new to our audience as well. So Qasar first is the co-founder and the CEO. As I mentioned before Applied Intuition, he was a partner and chief operating officer of Y Combinator, which is a famous name in the Silicon Valley in terms of startups and, venture accelerator, really is the way it says here. But he is actually has his mechanical engineering degree from Kettering University. Casey, you should know my son also has a Kettering degree.
Nice.
in chemical engineering, which is not quite the same as the bigger ones like mechanical. Peter Ludwig, as the co-founder and CTO, did his undergraduate work at the University of Michigan in computer science. That is not that far from us here in West Michigan, in Ann Arbor. 5 years at Google in engineering, where he led efforts on Google Maps, Android Automotive. And in 2017, he started Applied Intuition with Qasar. And since then, Applied has really established itself as a leading vehicle software supplier. In some cases, you could think of them as a software as a service business, but we're going to let Qasar or Peter describe that in just a moment. Guys, thanks very much for coming on Truck Tech this week.
Alan, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
To be here.
Yeah, great to be here. I think you did a great description of the company. We fundamentally enable our partners to unlock technologies that are now becoming more important to all the industries we work in. And the industries Applied specifically focuses on our automotive, it's trucking, it's U.S. defense, it's construction and mining, it's agriculture. Everywhere there's physical vehicles, that's kind of the area that we look in. And we have three business lines. The tools is which many of your listeners and our customers know us as in order to build autonomous systems. In certain cases, we build autonomy directly for our customers. So that's the recent Isuzu partnership that we announced, but we've previously done it for other companies as well. And then thirdly, a vehicle platform, which we also announced earlier this year, which is for all the audience members who are kind of more technically inclined. This is like the electrical architecture for a vehicle, and that's its own business line. But a software supplier is kind of the shorthand for all of that.
Yeah. Peter, from your perspective as CTO, I want to get into, and we're going to focus as much as possible on trucking, but let me spend just a moment because I usually get into finances along the way in these podcasts anyway. Right now, you guys are valued, or at least your enterprise value is what, $6 billion after your most recent raise? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's something that I think stands out in the business where, we do follow some of the autonomous trucking companies pretty closely. As you may know, nobody's really at that point. I mean, certainly during the SPAC frenzy, we saw numbers like that, but nothing that really has stood up to that. But you guys have kind of done it one brick at a time, one customer at a time. Is that a good way to think of it?
Absolutely. I think that our business really is that of enabling our customers to bring the most advanced vehicle technology to their customers to market. And I think that we've played conservatively in that we're very careful in the products that we choose to build and making sure that we're building them really well and making our customers happy. And that's, I would say, created a flywheel where our business has grown in a healthy manner over the last 7 years.
Yeah. And
the thing that I would say is, we're very much a Silicon Valley company in the sense that, we're headquarters here, we're software business, et cetera. Both of us, Peter and I, worked at Google. But in many ways, also culturally, we're very much a Detroit company. Also where Peter and I are from. We grew up there. We grew up, our families are very much in the car business in the deepest way possible. So I think you see kind of a culture and the way that we build products and businesses that kind of mix a little of both, hopefully the best of both worlds and not the worst of both worlds. Yeah. We don't want to be arrogant and, simultaneously resistant to new technology. It's like we want to be, fast and adopting new technology. So, and humble.
And I'll be careful not to make you pick between Detroit and Silicon Valley, because
if I had to pick,
they do coexist, right? I mean,
if I had to pick, I got to pick Michigan. I mean, you got to play for the home team.
Well, it's funny because I spent 20 years at General Motors in media relations, and interestingly enough, with no real technical background. It's funny that I do a truck tech podcast, but with no real technical background, I ended up covering the R&D space at GM before in my later years, and fuel cells and things like that. So that's kind of how a lot of this came about for me anyway. Now, your deep roots, so you mentioned Silicon Valley, and your roots there, and many of your investors suggest that it in some ways does exist apart from vehicle design. Yet you talk about dealing directly with your customers. So how integrated is autonomy with the products on which it's being used?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for our business and our products to be like arm's length. So we do have strong and deep relationships with all of our customers. We're pretty bespoke, in that sense. Each of our customers is different. Each of our customers has different goals, and you could have 3 companies pursuing autonomy in trucking, all based in the same town, all trying to get autonomy going in Texas, and have actually very different approaches. And so we have to meet our customer where they want it. One thing is absolutely true is we are extremely customer oriented. Like, we're not taking for all your audience and everyone, we're not taking products to market. We're not taking autonomy to market. Right. We're enabling our customers to do that. And sometimes we do it through the tools they use. Sometimes we do it with a reference stack. Sometimes we do it with a vehicle platform that maybe is underlying. But we're really helping them take a product to market. So as you came from GM, we're very much like a supplier. Mm-hmm. Like, a supplier, they don't make their own cars. They make, Magna, like most of your listeners don't know who Magna is. They might not know what ZF is, or they might not know what a Aptiv is. But these are giant companies in the space that enable the General Motors or many, many other companies in order to be successful. And I think that's kind of our ancestral roots. I think what's different is we just do it with software, rather than, diesel pumps and windshield wipers and the things that you
well, and it's so funny that you mentioned Aptiv, because if you go way back, that was Delphi. And Delphi one time was part of General Motors. I mean, if you want to go back to like the 80s and early 90s, which I actually do. But anyway, it is interesting though. And I mean, but we don't need to go there. It's interesting to me that in the last year, Applied has made a couple of significant moves in the trucking space, which of course is what our audience is mostly focused on. You purchased Embark Trucks. We followed them very closely, and Alex, I think, is one of our favorite people, honestly, out there. And establishing then a 5-year relationship now with Isuzu. Before that, you had the agreement with Torque Robotics. I think you mentioned that you actually worked with Daimler well before the split off of Daimler Truck. So as autonomy begins to sort of become reality on roadways through both robotaxis and commercial trucking, do you see one use case or another becoming dominant? And of course we've got to include off-road and military in those verticals too, right?
I think I'm sure Peter has his own view, but my knee-jerk reaction here would be, think about autonomy like mobile. And we're sitting in 2005, when everyone's using Motorola Razrs and flip phones. And it's before the big boom of the iPhone and the App Store. The iPhone launches without an App Store, right? Then the App Store comes, and then you have Uber and WhatsApp and Instagram. Like, how do you even think about Instagram in 2005 when cameras are not very high quality? There's no broadband internet on your phone. It's just a texting, machine, which kind of replaces landlines. I would recommend to think about autonomy similarly. It's hard actually to extrapolate like there'll be one use case that'll dominate them all. We think there's actually going to be many, and there's going to be many, many winners. I mean, we're in this industry where we think literally all of our customers could be huge winners. It's not like a zero sum game. And I think, you talk about Silicon Valley versus Detroit as a cultural kind of a staple. In a mature industry, you tend to play for a zero sum outcome because there's basically a set number of buyers and a set number of products, and now you're just eking out margins left or right. But Silicon Valley, and the hallmark of kind of American growth for the last 10 years, it's interesting. 10 years ago, the European GDP and American GDP were very similar. Now Europe's GDP is 67% of America. So America has actually grown a lot in the last 10 years. And where's that growth predominantly been fueled by? If you look at the broader markets, it is Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley has this growth mindset, which I think is really actually very inspiring and something that the rest of the world, not only the US, can learn from. And so I think that's the kind of way that we approach the ecosystem. We don't know if there's a single, I mean, honestly, we just don't know. Like, is there a single use case that's going to win? It's like, probably it's going to be like what's happened in Silicon Valley. There's a bunch of use cases and a bunch of companies. One thing we know for sure is autonomy is really important, and software is increasingly important, not only in trucking, not only in automotive, in our lives as a whole. I mean, you just think about it as an individual consumer. How much software did you use 20 years ago? Maybe you'd log on to your email for 10 minutes at the end of the day on AOL. Today, you're constantly connected to the internet. That's a growing market. I think the similar thing is in vehicles. I don't know, Peter, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think a few things I would add. And one is that within the realm of autonomy, there's a very long list of very difficult problems that need to be solved to actually make the system work. And so 20 years ago, right, those were mostly research questions. Now, many of those questions are solved, and they're just very difficult engineering problems. But it's worth noting that those problems actually, they tend to have a lot of similarities across the different use cases. So solving autonomy for trucks and then solving autonomy for military vehicles is actually not that different of a problem. And in fact, the tools that are involved actually have a lot of overlap. And at this point, now in 2024, right, as a company, Applied Intuition, we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars developing our tooling platform. And then now we have a bunch of customers that pay us much less than that.
We put numbers on it. We spent over $500 million developing our tools. I mean, that's a Deloitte audited number. I mean, that is a giant amount of money and resources. And no individual company, save one or two on the planet, can afford that type of investment on just tools, which your end customer doesn't use. It's almost like, imagine, I come from the manufacturing where I started my career. Imagine if you tried to build a factory with everything bespoke, your own drills, your own pallets, your own tables.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
It's too expensive.
Right.
So what you do is you go buy tables from, or rollers from Bosch Rexroth. You go to, there's Siemens will sell you automation tech. Fanuc Robotics will sell you, and then you put the factory in. Now, what comes out of the factory is going to be different. And the factory could be in the same town, but a GM factory, a Ford factory, a Chrysler factory, all in Sterling Heights and Utica, can have very different things coming out of the assembly, even though the tools inside are very similar. And then that's the ethos in which we work in.
Yeah, and in summary, though, I think all of these different autonomy use cases, they're all maturing. I think the media tends to cover some more than others. For example, the Waymo robotaxis get a lot of news attention. But I think really all of these fields are advancing quickly.
Guys, it's interesting that you mentioned, the similarities between, off-road or military and I guess on highway for trucking. Again, we're a trucking podcast. But look at Kodiak, for example. They are starting now in the Permian Basin rather than on I-45 in Texas, right? I mean, they want to get revenue and they need to do that, but they're doing, fracking sand first, right? Very short distances and things like that. But they've been on the highway since, the latter part of the last decade. So, I guess I'm seeing what you're talking about, and we're seeing more and more entries into things like distribution yard autonomy and things like that. So, it doesn't, I guess I wasn't looking for you to pin it down to one, but just sort of, where would we see, some level.
I think, yeah, you're seeing it. Kodiak is a customer of ours. We think really highly of them, as are a bunch of other companies like Torque you mentioned, or Gatik. The companies we really look up to that are tackling kind of really important and distinctive use cases. I mean, the Kodiak use case and the Gatik use case are actually, very, very different, even though they're the same universe. I think it's a often mistake that's made is in emerging industries is like you actually take the old zero sum mindset that these companies are going to have, one or the other is going to win.
Right.
I think there's a future that all of these use cases independently can be massive multi-billion-dollar revenue opportunities for each of our customers and each of the players there. So I think, I'm not just saying this because I'm a fan of those companies. I think the Torque use case is super compelling. I think the Gatik use case is super compelling. I think the Kodiak use case is super compelling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think for me, it's not like a one or the other. I think all of them are. Now, if you tell me like on the same highway, two companies are running, back to back, then we'd have to really get into the business of like where their operational costs, what sensors they're using. And then you maybe have a better, but even
Sure.
then, I mean, it's always not that black and white.
Let me ask you for just a minute, because our time's going to go quickly here. When you paid, Embark, as I said, we followed Embark quite a bit. And, Alex Gonzalez, one of these guys, Alex Rodriguez, one of these brilliant guys, right? Absolutely brilliant guy. And, they were, billionaire babies, he and his partner and that sort of thing for a little while. And then for $71 million, you got what was sort of, I guess, the good stuff, whatever that was. What has Embark, and I know you have lots and lots of ways to build things, tools. What has Embark brought to you that you could say that doesn't get us too far in the weeds? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, data. We have things like we build like tools like products like synthetic data generators. Having real data was very valuable for us. So like those practical things. There's some Embark employees who joined us. So there are a number of things. When we originally acquired them, that was very much the goal. It was like, hey, this is a good deal for the amount of data to improve some of our tools. That was frankly the entire strategy. And as we've kind of grown, like you have the example with the Suzu partnership, where they're saying, hey, can we use some of that technology as a reference? And we say, yeah, that can work. I think the big learning from Embark. So I was an investor in the company. I've known them from when they were doing campus shuttles. I think very highly of Alex and Brandon. I mean, literally putting money into the company when they were very, very young. The punchline there is, I think the mistake or the miscalculation there was the path was going to take a lot longer.
Right.
And I think this, by the way, it has happened in the industry. It's not only on them and every single person. Now, they, unlike Waymo, who has a search engine funding them, that's the reality that came in. I think when we started the company, we didn't quite know and have an idea that autonomy would take that much longer. But we had this ethos, which is more like the Berkshire Hathaway kind of view, or you could say the Midwest view, which is like, hey, let's kind of build a business that's going to have cash generating pretty soon. The reason most Silicon Valley companies don't do that is those companies also tend to be very small.
Yeah.
So we luckily ended up in a situation where we created tools that generate some cash, and there was a big market there. But there is a parallel universe if you deploy our strategy, which is, hey, just get revenues, and that's what you're going to focus on early on to sustain the business, that you actually don't build a big company. Sure. And I think that just broke, there's absolute randomness in all of this as well. There's one great adage about Silicon Valley is, when the company fails, you can write like these long, postmortems about all these things that are out of your control. But nobody writes any postmortems when the company succeeds of all these things were out of your control that helped you out. So like, when we talk internally, when we have a positive outcome, I say, hey guys, there's a lot of luck involved in this. Don't get too self-congratulatory here. So we've had some things break in our favor where we're obviously super happy about.
Well, here's something I'd like to, maybe we'll have to get you out of here on this because I want to respect your time. But the recently announced partnership with Isuzu, how does that fit into Isuzu's goal, which they announced just a few months ago, to be Gaddex's manufacturing partner for, kind of that short haul, middle mile autonomy? Does all this come together in some fashion with, some of the background that you can provide and some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is no. I mean, we're working on L4 trucking in Japan with
Okay.
Isuzu.
All
And
right.
it's heavy duty trucks instead of
Yep.
the mid duty trucks. So it's in the terms of a vehicle company like Isuzu, these are actually separate programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you take any large company, a Volkswagen, a Toyota, a General Motors. These are companies with hundreds of thousands of employees. I mean, they're like countries. I mean, they have divisions that don't work with each other, don't talk to each other.
Yep.
They're independently playing for different markets. So the group in the
I'm
Suzu that
having
is working,
flashbacks as you say this.
yeah, the group that works on Japan L4 Class A trucks is very
Right.
different,
Sure.
and at least it would be news to us if there's any overlap. Yeah,
Yeah.
Gaddex's a customer of ours. We think very highly of them. Isuzu's a customer of ours. We think very highly of them. I think as you mentioned Delphi and Aptiv. This is very common in the industry. There's like you work on projects like in defense. There's the if you're familiar with that, it's teaming. Sometimes you compete on projects. The next project you're working on together.
Sure.
So I think that's just par for the business. It's a complex business. It's not like we're not making like software for dentist offices, and the dentist is only going to choose one software, and one company's going to win or lose. These are giant multinationals with tens of billions in revenue, with thousands of projects that are sometimes not related at all. I mean, you take like a company like Google that we're more familiar with as American consumers than, let's say, in Isuzu. Google has a YouTube, and it has a search and maps, and these are quite different. I mean, literally inside the company, they're completely different divisions. They're very different goals and different leadership and different
Right.
infrastructure. So that's kind of the situation there.
Well, if we can do just one more real quick, because you mentioned Torque and how impressed you were with them. It's interesting to me, as we look at sort of the near term picture for level 4 on highway autonomy, we're looking at Aurora, which is, from a scaling perspective, is teamed up with Continental, right? Which is actually looks to me to be a brilliant move in terms of having line side installation around 2027 for real scaling. You've got Kodiak, which we discussed, and then you've got Torque, which, because Torque has access to all of that Daimler customer base, really, and is already working with some of the biggest ones, I guess I'd like your take on sort of where they are. They've said 2027 is just fine for them, but they'll be scaling in 2027. They're not going to just be doing a few upfits, right?
Yeah, I don't know the details, frankly, in those individual projects, but like as an example, Continental's a customer of ours as well. So we're throughout the industry. The broad point is, I think the whole industry sees production emerging. Like the reality that we were promised for a long time is finally coming. It took longer to get there, but it's getting there. And the best evidence of that, where you don't need to know any internal information, because I'm always why I'm kind of skirting around is I don't want to accidentally say something that a customer is like not told in a public forum. Is Waymo? It's quite public. They now you can go on Waymo rides as a consumer with no wait list. You just download the app. I know people have taken hundreds of rides. They're expanding their geographic footprint. That is super exciting. It is incredibly exciting. I mean, as people who are in the industry, who love technology, as engineers, we're excited by the fact that you're moving from research to true production engineering.
Sure.
But as a consumer, it's exciting because it's safer.
Mm-hmm.
Cars like you driving today will be most likely the most dangerous thing that you'll do. Unless you work in a couple of hazardous jobs, it'll be the most dangerous thing you do, i.e., your truck driver.
It's I mean, that's pretty dangerous.
Podcast, right? Alan, but I think driving is an extremely dangerous thing. It's if your audience, and all the stats, I won't rehash them, but if we had that level of of casualty in almost any field, it would be like a national crisis.
Yep.
But we just kind of accept that you could have a very serious, life-changing accident within 20 minutes of this podcast with absolutely nothing that you did. You're sober, you're alert, you're not distracted, you're not texting, and then you just get hit by another car. Maybe somebody else has made a decision which was as wise as yours. And I think that's what the Waymo stuff is really, I think as a consumer, it's what's really exciting about it.
Yeah.
The largest societal impacts and the economic impacts, all those will play out over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I think that's well beyond my pay grade. My pay grade is tools for autonomy.
Well, guys, you've been tremendous to give us this time. Thank you so much, Peter and Qasar, for coming on Truck Tech and being part of the show. I hope we can have you back sometime.
Yeah, we'd love to. We'd love it. Thanks for the conversation, Alan. It was fun.
You bet.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. All right, guys, folks, we are going to be back with a new show again next week. We can't tell you exactly what that is yet, but just have to tune in. Remember that we do have still discounts available for the Future of Freight Festival in November in Chattanooga. And that discount is available on Friday in the Truck Tech newsletter. For now, again, our thanks to our guests, to Peter and Qasar, and we will see you next time.